Already?
Hi everyone, I'm gonna give it a minute, let people filter in. Thank you for coming. Alrighty, we can get started. I just wanted to say good evening. Thank you for coming. I'm Danielle Angelari, and I'm the Executive Director of NAMI Northern Illinois. And for those of you who aren't familiar with us, we are a part of the National Alliance on Mental Illness, who is a grassroots organization dedicated to improving lives of individuals and families living with mental illness. And we do that through many peer-led support groups, peer-led education, community education, advocacy efforts, and we do a ton more. So if you're ever interested in getting involved with us, please reach out to us. We'd love to have you. So a couple of updates on our front. I do want to say that we keep updating our support group locations and times. So if you would like an updated list of that, you can send me your email and I would be happy to forward you one. Our annual event, Mulligans for Mental Illness, is coming up on June 7th. So you still have time to get a group together if you'd like to come out and participate with us. And I do want to mention that we have another community education program similar to this evening next week, March 31st at 5:30 p.m. with Jackie Phillips, and she's going to talk to us about supporting one another through distance learning from a high school teacher perspective, kind of geared towards kids and teachers and their families. So on to the main event tonight, I would like to introduce you to Mary Gubbe Lee, who is going to talk to us a little bit about how the pandemic has impacted not only our physical bodies, but our minds. And then a little bit more on how to take care of yourself. Thanks, Mary.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Danielle. I was explaining to Danielle right before we got started, gee, how did this presentation come about? And I was approached by one of our larger social service agencies in town saying, what's going on, Mary? Can you help us? Our clients, our customers are so different now. They're so crabby. They're so short-tempered. They're just not the same. They're not themselves anymore. Ever since this pandemic, things are different. So I said I would be happy to put together a presentation for them and help them understand what's happening to people because of this awful pandemic. And you know, they're downright irritating. I guess that's one of the things I could share with right away. No one likes to be locked down, right? All those months that we're on lockdown was just devastating for many of us. And we know now that homeschooling is not popular. It's not popular with parents or the kids. And we also know there's going to be some horrible social problems with the kids and their social maturation. We still can't travel in this country, but not outside. And even inside, there's a lot of rules and regulations. It was hard for a long time to not be able to go out to eat and have a regular sit-down dinner. Prices have gone sky high, especially with things like gasoline and with food. Social distancing, having to stay 6 to 7 feet apart is really hard. And then wearing masks. Who likes to wear a mask? It's really difficult, and you really can't see the expressions on the person's face that you're communicating with. We all are missing our family and friends. And think about all the people who lost their jobs. They might have even lost their company. And it just ruined the heck out of all of our holidays, from Christmas to Easter to St. Patrick's Day to Thanksgiving. And no hugs. Can't hug people. It's that social distancing again. And it's not the same getting the old elbow bump, right? It's just not the same. And I'll talk a little bit about just missing the hugs in general. Can't shake people's hands. And again, if we smile, who could see it? Nobody could see it through those masks. And there's so many more. I'm sure you're thinking you could probably come up with an additional list just as long as this, about how irritating the pandemic has been for you and how it's really impacted your life. So this COVID-19, it's so stressful, so much fear, so much anxiety, because it's a new disease. We don't know anything about it, right? We don't have any longitudinal studies, they say, to show about what care and treatment is best and what vaccines are best. And it's overwhelming, and it's bringing out very strong emotions with adults and children. And of course, with following the rules of public health, which we need to stay physically safe, it's very lonely, it's very isolating. And even though we know it's necessary, it's really hard, and it's changing us, very much changing us. So we're not only worried about ourselves and our own health, but also the health of our loved ones. We don't want to see any family and friends get sick. We don't want to lose anyone. We certainly don't want to lose our jobs or lose our companies. And then what about all those support services? NAMI has done an excellent job with continuing to offer the support groups that they have, but it's not the same when it's on Zoom. It's not the same when you're not in person. So what are we finding? People are either sleeping all the time or not sleeping at all. They're eating all the time or they're not eating at all. If you already have a health problem, it's actually really impacting on your physical health as well. And if you have a mental health problem, that's even more serious. And what we have found now, with all the research and studies going on, the huge increases in tobacco, alcohol, and other substances. I can tell you is flat out, pandemics can cause mental illness. It's now going to be listed as one of the causes of mental illness, and I'll explain to you why. I have some really good informative slides for you that'll help you understand that. But just think about the people who already have a mental illness. It's putting them at much more risk, making it much more stressful, much more anxious for them to really get through and hold on to their dear recovery. Because of course, people that have a mental illness or substance use disorder are already very vulnerable. They have to manage their thinking and their feelings and their mood or behaviors to be able to function in this world and to be able to relate to others. And now if you add on additional stress and additional fear and additional anxiety and additional social isolation, it really is going to increase those and put people at very high risk. So what we're seeing is this pandemic is causing neurological changes in our brain. So if you take a look at this, you take a look on the left-hand side, what does a healthy brain look like? And what does a brain look like with PTSD? Well, the healthy brain, you're going to see things all fired up in the front part of the brain. That's where that red stuff is. And we need lots of energy. We need lots of chemicals going in that part of the brain, because that brain controls what we call our executive functions. People who have PTSD, you can see the red is all over the place. So they're not making good decisions. They're not well at planning and organizing. And then take a look on the right-hand side of a person, a PET scan that does not have depression, and then a person who does have depression. You can see everything lit up and pretty even with the no depression, and it's just literally blah for the person who has depression. And our brain is fascinating. Some of you might have heard me talk about this before, but it's one of the things that fascinates me the most about our bodies, because it's composed of billions and billions of nerve cells called neurons. And they're all scrunched in there, right? But physically, they really don't touch each other. So I have some slides that'll help you understand that. So these neurons, again, billions of them, how are they going to get information from one nerve cell to another if they don't touch each other? Chemistry, called neurotransmitters. Those are the chemicals that help communicate from one nerve cell to another. And that space that's between each individual nerve cell is called a synapse. Okay, so we have sending information, we have receiving information. So this is an actual slide of what those neurons look like. So they have these little finger-like appendages that are called dendrites here. And even though you can't see it at the terminal where they're communicating with each other, they aren't physically touching each other. So again, how do we get information from one nerve cell to another? We use neurotransmitters, chemicals, and that's how we can communicate one to another. And we have lots of neurotransmitters. And of course, one of the ones I'm looking forward to dealing with right now with our springtime coming is histamine. Okay, so I have problems with allergies when everything starts to bloom. So I need to take an antihistamine. But the big three neurotransmitters when it comes to mental illness and substance use disorders are serotonin, dopamine, and norepinephrine. And what we are finding from the pandemic is these three neurotransmitters are decreasing in the amount that they have. So we are not getting the information from one nerve cell to another like we should. So what do we need these for? Well, dopamine is number one. Think of the things that dopamine does for you. It helps you pay attention. It gives you the motivation and the drive to get things done. It also makes you experience pleasure, gives you a feeling of reward, and it helps regulate all of our moods. So if we don't have enough dopamine, wow, look at what the impact's going to be. The next one, norepinephrine, that regulates how alert we are, okay, attentive. How much can we concentrate? What kind of energy do we have? But it also regulates our anxiety and, two, our mood. So imagine if we don't have enough norepinephrine, the problems we're going to have. Serotonin regulates our obsessions, our compulsions, anxiety, memory, and mood. So without the regularity of serotonin, again, think of the problems that we're going to have. And the pandemic is impacting all three of these neurotransmitters. Now, how this works, of course, depends on where in the brain it's happening. And that really determines what kinds of symptoms we're having that are symptoms of a mental illness. So the key parts of the brain, again, the one that's really protected because it's got the hardest bone we have right over here across our forehead, that's called the prefrontal cortex. And that really regulates our personality, but also it controls what we call our executive functions, how to plan, how to organize, how to stay on task, how to pay attention, how to get things done. And that part of our brain and our entire brain really does not mature till at least 25 or 26 years of age. So think of what this pandemic is doing to people who have not even yet had their brain mature yet. And that part of the brain, 100% is regulated by dopamine. So without dopamine, we aren't going to have those executive functions. So pandemics are causing this psychological or physical, isolation and also the social distancing. And it has to happen. We need to be safe. We need to be physically healthy. But also that isolation causes serious decreases in the dopamine. So what happens is people tend to be what we call more subordinate, like, I don't care, do whatever. I don't have control over anything. I have no way of planning and organizing. I have no control over anything in my life right now. And that's how a lot of people are thinking and a lot of people are feeling. So we do know that, again, the pandemics are causing that because of the physical isolation and distancing, are causing the decreases in the dopamine. There have been a lot of studies about social distancing and dopamine. And some of the ones that are probably the most known countrywide, if not worldwide, are the ones with the rhesus monkeys. And those experiments, if you want to call those tests, those research monkeys were all very close to here, right across the border in Madison, Wisconsin. So these monkeys have a very important history with us because, again, other than chimpanzees, their brain is the closest to the human brain. So we know everything from our functioning of our brain is again, directly parallel to what's going on with theirs. So when it comes to our DNA and it comes to our blood work, the monkeys are so close to us. And they're very, very intelligent beings. They're very social beings. They communicate with each other. They take care of each other. They preen each other. How intelligent are they? Wow, they actually went into space before we did, because we have been sending rhesus monkeys to outer space since 1949. What one of the monkeys looked like is they were off to space. So what was this experiment like? Well, rhesus monkeys need to be in groups. They take care of themselves, but they take care of each other. They communicate, they need to be together. So the experiment was, well, what happens if they're not all together? What's going to happen to the monkeys? So they were separated for more than a year apart from each other, all individually, none in a group. And the ones who were socially isolated, they could test them and find out, yes, they have decreases in dopamine. They were extremely stressed. They felt like, do whatever, because I'm not in charge. And if they were offered food or they were offered cocaine, they always took the cocaine. The rhesus monkeys up in Madison who were left together in their groups continued to have high dopamine levels. They weren't stressed out at all. If they were offered food or cocaine, they always took the food. So we've known what social distancing does based on these studies for years and years. So what are those mental illnesses we're seeing that are more prevalent in pandemics? Pandemics are causing them, or people who are already having these disorders, it's making them worse. So let me show you a few slides that'll help you understand this. So the big ones, of course, are the trauma and what we call stressor-related disorders. There is a biological basis of PTSD. So we know if someone has post-traumatic stress disorder, they are going to have problems not only with their brain chemistry, their dopamine, their prefrontal cortex, but they also have much, much higher levels of all the stress hormones. And we need stress hormones like cortisol, like epinephrine, like norepinephrine, because it helps us stay safe. It helps us with our fight or flight when there's ever a crisis or any kind of stressor coming up. So any thought of threat, we need to have those levels increase. But we know with people that have post-traumatic stress disorder, they're not just increased then, they're increased all the time. And these stress hormones can actually cause cancer when they're constantly increased within our brains. Let's talk a little bit about the amygdala too. I want to show you a picture of that because that's very, very important where a lot of this happens. So the biological basis of post-traumatic stress disorder here is in the brain. And again, just a good refresher for those of you who have not heard that term before, PTSD is the result of either personally experiencing a trauma or actually observing a trauma happening to someone else. When that happens, you are constantly reliving the event. It's kind of like a movie that's running in your brain. It goes on, and you can't turn it off, okay? Sometimes you can function and put it in the background during the day, but then it's going to come out in nightmares and night terrors. So in that brain, okay, this little tiny little round piece called the amygdala is so important. And look how it's buried in the brain, some for its own protection, because that amygdala is the one that really helps us make the big decision, the fight, flight, or freeze. So if something comes upon us and we perceive it as a threat, that amygdala is going to help us figure out, again, are we going to run? Are we going to stand up for ourselves? Or are we going to just freeze because we don't really know what to do? So again, here's the slide I spoke to you earlier. See that healthy brain with all that wonderful dopamine firing up in your prefrontal cortex, helping you make those good decisions. But with PTSD, wow, it's all over the place. It's not working how it should be. It's not working where it should be. So people are not making the best decisions. So here's something that's a little bit more graphic that'll help you understand. Think of somebody who does not have post-traumatic stress disorder. And here it is, the 4th of July, and they're hearing this crash, bam, and boom, or maybe even pow, pow, pow. And all of a sudden the body's like, that's a threat. What should I do? Well, where is it going to be decided? In the amygdala. That amygdala is what's going to send the information to the brainstem to decide, should we fight, flight, or freeze? But the amygdala sends neurotransmitters up to that prefrontal cortex and says, hey, what's going on? Help us make this decision. Is this really a threat? Should we fight, flight, or freeze? And that prefrontal cortex is going to say, no, it's fine. It's the 4th of July. No problem. Stay where you are. You're safe. There is no threat. Now let's take a look at what happens for somebody who has post-traumatic stress disorder. Again, they hear the bam bam or the pow pow, the fireworks close to the 4th of July or thereabouts, goes right to the amygdala. The amygdala has to decide, what am I going to tell that brainstem? Fight, flight, or freeze? The amygdala is going to say, let's send this up to that prefrontal cortex so we can get the right decision to make here. And of course, it's not working. So that person is going to really make the worst decisions. So cortisol, again, it's that hormone. Excuse me if I take a little drink here. It's needed to help make that decision. But cortisol, when it happens, we need it. It's definitely necessary. Don't get me wrong here. But here's the downside of the cortisol. It really does increase our sugars and our glucose in our bloodstream. And when that's constantly going, we're also facing things like weight gain, often breakout. We have acne, even heart attacks and strokes. So glucose at the time of a stress, at the time of a threat is fine. That's what it's for. But when it's constantly going on, these are all the things that can happen to us. Adrenaline, the energy, right, to get through anything, gives us a physical energy. It comes from the adrenal glands. So again, it's released if there's stress, but it also increases our blood circulation. It gives us a higher breathing level, and it gets us ready. But then people can actually have, physical problems from that as well. You can't have too much adrenaline. Now, we know post-traumatic stress disorder is very, very common, okay? We probably should assume that all of us have experienced some kind of trauma in our life, and what we bring to the trauma, or what our background, of course, will help us determine how much that trauma is going to impact us. But what I try to tell people is, because the trauma rates are so high, we should really assume everyone has experienced trauma. And because of that, we should always use what I call trauma-informed approaches with everyone, because hurt people hurt people. Okay, so we have to really understand, to protect ourselves and to protect other people, that those that have been traumatized are the ones that we should be concerned about. One of the new programs in town, a new organization in town that I have a deep respect for, is the Family Peace Center, because they're working with people who are the victims of domestic violence, but even more importantly, so they're working with those children to make sure that they don't get into the whole mental health system. So what did I mean by a trauma-informed approach? Well, we have to make sure people feel safe. We have to make sure that they are, they trust us, that we are transparent. They have to have peer support. They have to be more collaboration, right? Not having things done to them or for them, but with them. And they have to be given choice and giving a sense of power and control. And of course, we have to be very sensitive to people's race, their culture, their histories, and even their gender. So all this, and this is super brief, of course, about what a good trauma-informed approach would be for people who have been traumatized. The other disorders, the other mental health or mental illness, are the different anxiety disorders. We see a huge increase with this pandemic. And for people who have already experienced an anxiety disorder, the pandemic is making them so much worse. Now, when I say anxiety disorders, they're really kind of in 3 different groups. There's a generalized anxiety disorder, something, overall, the person is feeling something is wrong, not necessarily doesn't put their finger on exactly what it is, but something horribly has gone wrong with the world. You might have seen someone or heard of somebody who has panic attacks. They often look like a heart attack because the brain is racing and the heart is racing, and they're having trouble even just breathing regularly. And phobias are irrational fears, and we all have fears, and we tend to stay away from the things that we're afraid of as humans. But of course, if we have those social phobias, we can't be around other people. They're very serious, and they really impact our life. So again, people that had these disorders before the pandemic, we're seeing they're getting more seriously ill, and people that did not have this before the pandemic are now being diagnosed with anxiety disorders. So here's a good PET scan example of what one of the anxieties might look like. Look at the left-hand side, the normal, everything is pretty even. You kind of have even numbers of the blue and even the red is evenly distributed and the yellow as well. And things are just kind of all out of whack with the person that has panic attacks. And you don't see any of that red stuff at all, okay? And that red stuff is, of course, the dopamine, the major neurotransmitter that we've been talking about. The other illness that we're seeing a big impact on from the pandemic, of course, is depression. So again, people that had depression are becoming more and more depressed. And that just makes sense, right? The social isolation and not being able to see people, not being able to hug someone. All those are certainly impacting our depression. And then people that were never depressed before are now being diagnosed with depression. When we talk about a serious depression, a clinical depression, we're talking about both emotional symptoms and physical symptoms. So the emotional symptoms are things like feeling very sad or guilty or just not being interested in anything at all. And of course, the most serious is thoughts of suicide or even death. People that have physical symptoms, they are either have big changes. They're eating all the time or not eating, sleeping all the time or not sleeping, no energy, no get up and go, and not even any interest in sex. So that's what we're talking about with the depression symptoms. Again, people that had these symptoms before the pandemic, we're seeing are much more seriously ill, and people now since the pandemic are having these symptoms. So again, a good PET scan of what your brain looks like. So without the depression, see how things are kind of evened out a little bit. The kind of yellowy orangey stuff, of course, is that mostly the norepinephrine, mostly the serotonin. And then on the right-hand side, you could see that it's just kind of a blasé, right? There's not a lot of chemistry, not a lot of firing up going on at all. So of course the person isn't going to have any interest in things, energy in things, or feeling good about themselves or others. I think in addition to the mental illnesses, we need to talk about also the substance use disorders and how that has been impacted by the pandemic. So we know this is an illness of the brain, okay? This is a no-fault illness. We shouldn't be blaming people that have it. And it's a very, very chronic condition. And it's lifelong, right? There is no cure, just like there's no cure for mental illness. But with substance use disorders, we help people understand it a little bit better by comparing it to things like having high blood pressure or having diabetes. It's a problem with both your physical health and your behavioral health. And again, we know people have multiple episodes, right? Just one treatment, it doesn't mean, oh, okay, I'm done, I'm cured here. And so it's really a problem, kind of juggling all the things from treatment to being in recovery to also dealing with periods of relapse. Stacking statistics have come out even more so since this particular slide, but we know that in general, okay, as of the end of June of 2020, okay, so this is already more than 6 months ago, as of that time, people with anxiety and depression were up 31%, trauma, 26%, people using substances, either they started it or they increased the use, 13%, and sadly, the rate of suicide has been up 11%. Now remember, folks, this was as of the end of June of 2020. We will get the results soon, hopefully as of the end of December or the end of the year, because we get those from the Centers for Disease Control, and they only update these about every 6 months or so. But I have a feeling they're going to be even more devastating than what you can see here. Now, here's an interesting statistic in and of itself, and it'll help you understand too why and how do we know about the substance use disorders. Just alcohol alone in 2020, this is the calendar year of 2020, the alcohol sales rose 262%. And that's huge because we know throughout our country already there's a problem because around 81% of the people that have a substance use disorder are not getting any treatment. So these are really quite serious about the alcohol, especially. The other thing that we know that overdoses have been up 18% throughout the country. So it's not just alcohol, it's other drugs as well. So these pandemics, wow, they're sure doing a lot, right? So it's causing more crisis. We're seeing people that are just losing control. They don't have patience, and we're needing a lot more de-escalation. I'm sure you've heard in the news, the increases in crime are being tied up with the pandemic, huge increases in domestic violence. We're kind of worried about the kids who aren't going to school because we suspect there's probably huge increases also in abuse and neglect of children. But violent crime in general. I mean, the property crime did not go up much in the city of Rockford, but the physical crimes did, and also everything from shootings to homicides. So these are serious crises, but that less self-control, and again, the need for more de-escalation, because people just, again, they don't have that ability to stop and pause and reason and think things through. They're kind of acting way too quickly. I talked earlier about hugs, gee, we're told to social distance and that 6 feet and everything. And even our family members, unless they live with us in the same physical building, we're not supposed to hug them, and elbow bumps just don't have the same things that hugs do. Because if you want to just take a look at this slide, there's a wonderful chemical called oxytocin, and that's a stress decreaser. But by not hugging, we're not getting that oxytocin, okay? And without that, people are feeling so lonely and then really angry. So, and a lot of anger is based in fear. And boy, this pandemic has sure stirred up a lot of fear with people. Hugs really give you a sense of trust and also a sense of safety. People that hug you, care about you. We also know that hugs increase that serotonin level. So it really is helping our moods and creating us a feeling of happiness. Hugs actually strengthen our immune system, okay? So that thymus gland, okay, it's really helping us make sure we make those white blood cells. And we need those white blood cells to fight off infection. Hugs actually boost our self-esteem because, again, it makes us feel like, gee, we're important, we're accepted, people care about us, we must have some worth. Plus, even physically, hugs help us feel relaxed and take away tension and even pain. And it's a good teaching tool. It's giving and receiving, right? It's not just giving hugs, it's getting that hug back. So hugs help us also encourage empathy and understanding. So this is one thing we have to get back to soon, and hopefully we will now that we're getting some of the vaccines distributed, because people are actually encouraged to go see their grandparent, for example, and have the kids just give them a big hug, because all these things now have not been happening for over a year. We don't have the oxytocin that's decreasing our stress. Sorry, we have too much oxytocin, and we don't have enough serotonin that's helping us with our moods. So got to get back to those hugs. And what about those masks? Okay, very important. And we're even being told, gee, even with all the vaccines, we still need to wear the masks, right? But masks mean no smiles. And when you study the research about smiling, all the important things smiles do for us, they reassure us, okay, and reassure other people. You're okay, and I'm okay. It's just a form of politeness, being very polite. Plus, it helps us show that we trust you, you belong, you have good intentions, and it's a part of our social connectedness. And even the rhesus monkeys, I'm sure you've even seen other monkeys do that, they smile at each other, right? And a gentle smile, just a soft, gentle smile, is perceived as a sign of compassion. I care about you. I understand you. I'm here with you. So with smiling, again, these are all research things, we have what we call neuropeptides, okay? And they also fight off stress. So every time we smile and every time we are smiled at, and sometimes, of course, we're still smiling behind that mask, but no one can see us do that. When we smile, it helps really act as a pain reliever. And it increases that serotonin, which is what we need as an antidepressant. So we have to get back to smiling again. We have to figure out how to do that with still wearing the masks and being physically safe. Now, all this probably sounds like some complicated stuff, but to me, it's really pretty fascinating. The brain has what we call neuroplasticity, and that's kind of a good thing and a bad thing to have, the neuroplasticity, because that really gives these neurons the ability to change their function. So they create different pathways. When something is done over and over and over again, and now it's been over 12 months of no smiling, no hugging, right? No being with other people. So they have created different pathways now, and our whole structure of our brain has changed. So that's the bad news. With this neuroplasticity, our brains have changed. And they are not going to change back with just like an on and off, like a light switch. Now, the good news about neuroplasticity is we can change the brain back. We can do it, but it doesn't happen overnight. So, for example, we use this as a good example when we train therapists that are doing therapy, especially cognitive behavioral therapy, with people with depression, for example. They've had their neurotransmitters, okay, cut these new neural pathways and change their brain. But with cognitive behavioral therapy, they can change it back. But it's not going to just be like a light switch. So the point I'm really trying to get at with you folks, even if there was a cure for the coronavirus tomorrow, we are still going to have these problems for quite some time because we have to help ourselves and we have to help each other heal from this. We can use that neuroplasticity. We can change our brains back, but it's going to take some time and it's going to take some work. So what are some things we could do? I want you to leave with at least some ideas of things that you can try. So what are those happiness chemicals? Okay, we've got to have the dopamine. And again, we've had decreases in it because of the pandemic. We've got to have that serotonin. We have to have the oxytocin, and we have to have the endorphins. Those are what we call the happiness chemicals. Those are the chemicals that help us realize and feel happy, safe, okay, and socially part of other people. Dopamine. Dopamine, I call the reward chemical, okay? Because dopamine makes us feel good, right? And when do we feel rewarded? Well, we feel rewarded when we get something done. Wow, it feels really good. I can check that off the list today. But dopamine also increases and makes us feel a sense of reward when we take care of ourselves. And that's one of the things I think that we could really work on after this discussion tonight. We can feel good with dopamine after eating food. So what's the best place to get your dopamine? Chocolate. Okay. And the darker the chocolate, the higher the dopamine. Now, I'm not telling you to go home tonight and have a meal of dark chocolate because that's not the only answer, but you also have to eat other foods that are healthy as well. And another thing that makes us feel a reward is just celebrating those little wins, like, wow, this was great. Or I not only just got this done, or I actually got a compliment from somebody. This is wonderful. And to really celebrate those things, even how small they might be. Serotonin, we need that. Remember, that's the mood stabilizer. We know that's been decreased over this pandemic. So how can we build this back up? How do we get the serotonin? We know we can get it by meditation. We also know that running is good. Being exposed to the sun, and not to the point where you're getting a sunburn or something like that, but we know sunshine is filled with vitamin D, and vitamin D really does also help manage our emotions. Taking walks in nature, swimming, even riding a bike. So these things are all things that can help build our serotonin levels back up. Oxytocin, I call that one the love hormone. And so how can we replace that we've lost it with the pandemic? Some real simple things, real simple. Playing with a dog. We're bringing out those therapy dogs again. How about playing with a baby? Okay, we might be able to do that now that we can get back together with our families. It's just simply holding someone's hand. And remember, I talked a lot about those hugs. And probably one of the easiest ones that we can all do, can even do it over Zoom or over the phone, is give people compliments. Make sure the people feel loved. Endorphin, I call that one the painkiller. So what hurts, okay? It manages our pain. Well, things that actually help increase that endorphin back up are laughter, having fun. There are some of what we call essential oils that the scent of them, the smell of them helps build those endorphins back up. Watch a comedy instead of a tragedy on TV. Again, I already mentioned that dark chocolate, that helps as a painkiller as well. But exercising, in any form of exercising, not just riding a bike. So that helps build up those endorphins, and we've got to get those back. Now, what if we know somebody that's had serious anxiety or depression through this pandemic? How can we help them? Well, we should really be on the watch. We need to reach out to people, reach out to our family, our friends, our coworkers, even our neighbors, even if it's by phone or by Zoom. And if we're concerned about somebody, we really should find out, are they thinking of hurting themselves? Okay, and to do that, we have to also be not totally non-judgmental, all right? Make sure people feel reassured, make sure they get the information that they need, encourage them to get professional help, and then also seriously encourage self-help and other support services. And people aren't going to necessarily come to us. We have to go to them. We have to be the ones reaching out. De-escalation is another important piece that we all need to be part of, and that's helping people who are in a crisis or on the verge of being in crisis to really stop and to resolve what we call that conflict resolution. So during any kind of escalation, during any kind of crisis, there's always a conflict. There's something going on. And if we can help people solve that, hopefully they won't be so short-tempered, they won't make such bad decisions, and they won't be so antisocial. I put this one in there because I know you're going to be hearing this a lot from Danielle and from NAMI Northern Illinois over the spring and summer months. But the best thing we can do is to be kind to our mind. We take our brains so much for granted. So we need to be kind to our minds. And how do we do that? Well, we got to take care of ourselves physically, which means eating not only regularly, but healthy. We have to have good exercise, get enough sleep and not too much sleep, right? Not go out when we're sick. And if we can, get a massage, find some kind of physical activity that's fun. And if you can, take a vacation. And that doesn't even mean you have to go someplace overnight. You could take day trips, okay? Whatever you can do. And of course, this is probably the time where we've been a little too overly concerned with everything from cell phones to email to Facebook to Twitter and watching the news. So whatever we can do to help with our physical self-care. We also need to take care of ourselves emotionally. Got to spend time with people we care about, but also we know care about us. Okay, that's the real important piece. So, and stay in touch with people who are important. Be kind to yourself, be kind to your mind. So feel proud. Maybe the person you're complimenting today is yourself. So find your favorite movies, your favorite books, find some good activities that you like. And you know, crying is not a bad thing. Crying does help relieve stress and anxiety. But it's also important to find things that make you laugh, whether it's a TV show, whether it's a book, whether it's being around other people that are humorous. And if you are angry and you are really upset, try to figure out a way to solve it in a constructive way, which means really talking it out with somebody else. We also need to take care of ourselves spiritually. So again, that's making time for prayer and meditation and reflection. We get a lot of spiritual connection through nature or spiritual gatherings with family and friends. Really figure out what is our meaning in life, right? And figuring out how can we really endorse that. Gratitude. Think of all the things that you're grateful for. Singing is a huge thing for spiritual self-care. And it was kind of devastating to people that sing in choirs and miss singing at church. It's really, really rough for them. But even at home, okay, you can turn on the music and sing along with it. Find a way to celebrate some milestones. Again, try to read more inspirational literature, and be sure you reach out to other people and other causes that you believe in, and listen to music yourself, especially things that are inspiring. Now, there's some quick things you can do to reduce your stress, things you can do in a minute or two, okay? You're still working, you can say, oh, I don't have time to do all that stuff. Well, you can take turns with the breathing, right? The in through the nose and out through the mouth. Stretching, a little daydream, a little chuckle, doodling, okay? Again, pat yourself on the back. Look out the window. If you can't 4 to 5 minutes, listen to a music, chat quickly with a friend, take a real quick walk with fresh air, and eat a healthy snack. There's things that might take 10 minutes, like maybe to write in a journal every day. Again, do some meditation, tidy up something, okay? Or play a short game. Things that are more of a half hour, get a massage, exercise, have food with other people, go shopping, listen to a podcast. And another thing we should think about too is our 5 senses. All 5 of our senses can be worked with to help reduce our stress, that can help soothe us. So there's some lists here of things that you might want to consider. Again, helping us of things that we can taste, things that we can eat. Green tea is great. Things like bananas and nuts, and you'll see the second one on the list here again is chocolate. Smell, we have a very, very high sense of smell, and there's some special smells that are actually very healthy and very, very stress reducing. Things like lavender, eucalyptus, coconut. Sound is important too, and we could get that off the TV, off of our phone, okay, off of any other kind of appliance. But we know that listening to the leaves rustling, listening to the water going, listening to the fireplace, listening to the water ebb and flow. Some people actually get good refreshment from just listening to the train going, or white noise. Often white noise is used to even help people sleep. And then what about touch? Well, we've got everything from soft objects to Play-Doh to stress balls, whatever we can find. And then sight. Sight is something we can surround ourselves with. Figure out what is your favorite color. Put out wonderful pictures of your loved ones and landscapes. And if there's anything that we like to just laugh at or chuckle at, it's all the funny things with baby animals, right? Who can't laugh or chuckle or enjoy watching little puppies? And anything that's funny. So think about all those 5 senses and things that you could do, because we have to rebuild in ourselves and help others rebuild that serotonin, that norepinephrine, that dopamine, right? And all the other chemicals that we need that help us manage our stress and decrease our depression and anxiety. Now, what if we need help? Where can we go? Well, of course, the number one place I'm going to recommend is NAMI Northern Illinois, because they have excellent education programs, including family to family, NAMI Basics, and they have Zooms and webinars going on like this constantly. They also have support groups for people that have mental illness, and also family members of people who have a mental illness. They're out there fighting tooth and nail all the time for advocacy for people with mental illness, and they have a terrific website. And that website has links on it, so you can find out who are the providers, where are other meetings near me, what do I know about mental illness, or where can I find research about that? So quite an excellent website. So I'm wondering if Danielle, if we could open things up for questions, and did we want them to put it like in the chat box? How would you like them to manage their questions?
Yeah, if everyone can write in the Q&A section, I would be happy to read Mary questions if you have any. And thank you, Mary. Really nice presentation. I have also recorded this and I will be posting it on our website and our social media. So
great. So if anybody missed it today, we could have them watch it again.
Yes.
And my apologies, we probably should have mentioned something about how to ask the questions as I was going.
Yeah, I forgot because I told you I couldn't find my notes before this.
Well, we're going to blame everything on the pandemic, okay? Because that's how you got forgetful and
Exactly.
and lose things. Okay, it looks like we have one question.
More of a thank you. Kira said, really spot on. Thank you so much for this.
You're very welcome. And it was very eye-opening for me. I really enjoyed putting this together because I learned so much. I had so many of my family and friends are like, seriously, what? You're going to do what? You're thinking about what? And so we know now to blame a lot of this on the pandemic.
If you don't have any questions, guys, if you don't mind filling out a quick poll for me, I promise it won't be bad. I'm getting some more thank yous for you, Mary.
Okay.
Any parting words of wisdom?
No, I think I'd like to end with, be sure to take care of yourselves, but be sure to take care of each other, because most of us don't really reach out for help enough, right? We try to be independent and do things on our own. So please watch over yourself, but also look out for other people.
Can you hear my dog singing?
No, it looks like we have a couple other Q&As, or are those mostly comments?
I have someone asking for slides. Is that appropriate?
Yes, certainly. So do you have the information of the people who have attended this?
Yes, I do.
Then I will be happy to, I'll send you this presentation so you could send it on, because I think especially the last several slides that have all those suggestions about things you could do, it'd be nice to have your own copy of.
Perfect. Yeah, I'll send the link to the recording as well. And you did get a couple of more thank yous. That's what those other Q&As were.
Okay, great.
Thank you all. Appreciate it. And I hope you all have a really nice night.
Okay. Be kind to your mind.
Bye, Mary. Thank you.
Bye.